Now let's get into our class on A Journey to the West. The second stop, the third stop is now Rocky Mountains. It's really beautiful. Whenever you have an opportunity, the next time you go there, you can follow the footprints of Khenpo Sodargye and then follow his route and just go to the places that Khenpo Sodargye had went. Well, I myself also wish that I will have an opportunity to retread on this particular route again, just easily and relaxed. So at the foot of the Rocky Mountains, on June 30th, we left a beautiful Boulder and drove to the north, traveling over mountains after mountains, like riding on a roller coaster. After a drive of 2 or 3 hours, we arrived at Rocky Mountain Dharma Center. As vast as the Himalayas, the Rocky Mountains are the largest mountain range in North America. They stretch over 3,000 miles in straight line distance from the northern part of western Canada to New Mexico. Drainage of the Rockies runs eastward to Atlantic and Arctic Oceans, and westward to the Pacific Ocean. Well, I don't really want to get into too much details and too much of those trivials. I wanted to tell you more about it, but it's probably too much. The general climate for Rocky Mountain in July is very moderate and pleasant, neither too hot nor too cold. Forests, lakes, grasslands, and glaciers can be seen around the mountain ranges. Here, the sky is bright, the wind is clean, and the water is crystal clear and glistening. However, in Larungar, the wind is blade-like. The white snow is flurry, but the road is full of black ice and dangerous. And then to continue over here, in Rocky Mountains, in that area, it's really beautiful. And being surrounded by such a beautiful environment, one's mind naturally becomes calm, as if being exposed to a solitary retreat place where the great Tibetan masters of past lived in retreat. Khenpo Sodargye lived in this center for 7 days. He lived in a wooden retreat hut, and then I asked people to take photos of that retreat cabin. This particular photo doesn't show the forest surrounding it. There were some more beautiful photos, but we put this one over there. This Dharma Center preserved the Kagyu tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. Most of the practitioners were Americans. Staying away from the noise of the secular world, they built wooden huts or pitch tents on the mountain. Majority of them staying there, in fact, all of them are practitioners. They practice calm abiding meditation all year round. Among them, some had been in retreat for more than 6 years. All of them were thrilled by the arrival of Yijino, eager to receive profound empowerment and pithy instructions of a sacred mantra from him. Over here, the audience, unlike the previous audience, this group of audience were all practitioners. Compared to the previous audience, sometimes were non-Buddhists, sometimes were beginners, and sometimes were a mixed crowd. So over here, it's a rather very simple crowd, a relaxed chat. As soon as we arrived at Rocky Mountain Dharma Center in the afternoon, Khenpo Sodargye gave a short talk to the people there and bless them by touching their heads one by one. This particular ritual or ceremony was held at a Nechon temple, but not at a Boulder. Back then, there was a large tent set up for the occasion. I'm not sure how it is going with that center right now. I heard that not too many people are at that center now. But I think it would be such a shame if this center is not prosperous. In this center, there's a large stupa as well. In the later part, we will talk about it. It's a very interesting place. So Patsor Rinpoche, after resting for a bit, he sat on the outside of the wooden cabin under the roof over there, and then looking out to the forest and meadow, and then had a very relaxing chat with the Gyatso Rinpoche, along with a few other great masters, Tibetan Buddhist masters. You can see the photo over here. I think there was a roof sticking out right on top of that window. But it seems that this roof is moved over, but I'm not sure what's going on. Maybe they had a reconstruction or some sort, I'm not quite sure. Gyatso Rinpoche was recognized as a Toku at a very young age. Toku Ishidorje went to Demba and Jinchuan area and brought Gyatso Rinpoche back and to be recognized as a Toku. And people back then in Tibet usually would consider Jinchuan as the Chinese region, Chinese area. That is why they named him as Gyatso Rinpoche, Gyatso, which means the Chinese Toku. And then later, in India, it is and then later, after 10 years of the historical chaos, he went to India, and then in India, some of the great masters required a group of lamas to propagate Dharma to the West. That's how he went to the United States. But at the very beginning, he was recognized as a Toku of Doma. That is why he considers that this is his monastery, or he's from Doma Monastery, and I'm also from Doma Monastery, so he would call me as the young Khenpo from my monastery. So he holds Doma Monastery as his monastery as well. And then later he went to the United States and propagated Dharma. At that time, Gyatso Rinpoche started to talk about Doma Monastery. He said that he wanted to go to Sertai and Doma because Yangtang Rinpoche asked him to go to Doma. When he went to Drago, he got a car and then got to the monastery, and then Toku Tishta saw him coming and saying that, well, how could you get here? I didn't expect you. Why didn't you tell me? And Gyatso Rinpoche said that I didn't like to tell others about my arrival, otherwise I will have to deal with all kinds of receptions. Especially now I'm probably worse than how I used to be, so there is really no need. And that's how he told Toku Tishta. Back in 1987, when we went to Mount Wutai, there was a year that he came to Doma Monastery, and then when Doma Monastery and the people received him over there, the condition was rather very poor, and they didn't have enough tsampa, they didn't have enough or a nice room to receive him. Rather, they had to just very simply sweep up a room and receive him. And he felt that Doma Monastery is under such poor conditions, so he gave everyone $5 and a Vajra knot. At that time, $5 is a lot. And then he gave the monastery $2,000, and then he went back without spending the night. So that's how he remembered Doma Monastery, and he wanted to reconstruct Doma Monastery because the monastery only started to reconstruct back in 1987. 1985, and he came to visit in 1986. So he said that it would be better to have about 20 to 30 rooms for the monastics to live. And later, when he met Toku Yangtang, he said that while I've been to your monastery, the conditions are very poor. As the Toku, you have to think about it. I will try to help you. And then Toku Yangtang also went to Taiwan, to United States, and got some fundraising for the building of the Buddhist Academy. And then at that time, I think he contributed for about over hundreds of thousands of RMB. And those fundraising money was used to construct the monastery. The great masters throughout history actually try very best to build monasteries and Buddhist institutes to help the monastics. So whatever kinds of capacities they have, they will try their best to contribute to the propagation of Dharma as well as the livelihood of the monastics and so on. When we look back at history and thinking about the condition of the monastery back then and think about the great masters had contributed to the development and the construction of the different monasteries and Buddhist academies, we can see that they are really selfless and contributed such greatly. Some of the stories are very touching too. For example, Toku Tishita went to the Hongyuan area to fundraise. He was a rather large man, and he had to go to different places to fundraise, and people didn't really know him. And he haven't been to Larungar yet. He got more well known after he gave the oral transmission of the entire Tibetan Tripitaka. But before that, when he was not well known, there was an Ake Gendenoru who knew him and helped him to get a car, to get a tractor, and then to get fundraise. And they got some 60,000 RMB from fundraising to reconstruct the beaten up shrine hall that they had earlier. So at that time, the conditions were rather very poor in general, and it was very difficult to build a monastery. But in the hearts and minds of all the great masters, all they can think of is to cultivate the monastics so that they can propagate Dharma, and including our monastery over here, including Larungar here. Whenever we think about it, whenever we think about how Larungar was like years ago, you probably don't even believe it, because the condition we had back then probably sounds like the primitive society. Now that you're sitting on carpets and rugs, now you have place to receive Dharma teachings, now that you have place to receive mentoring classes. Back then, these kinds of conditions were undreamed of. We only had maybe 1 to 2 kilos of lamp oil, and then we can get a little bit of noodles and all that, and we had to walk for 4 to 5 hours to get some noodles, to buy some noodles and food. And sometimes we had to walk all night and return back at 6 a.m. and sometimes at 3 a.m. It was very difficult to live. We didn't have electricity, and we eat rather quite poorly too. Even Pontsuk Rinpoche's room and housing was quite poorly constructed. Now that you are here to study, and you probably feel that this is so out of your imagination. And then Khenpo Rinpoche said that if the authorities give permission, the construction of a Doma monastery wouldn't be a problem. The Koma clan is a large clan, and considering its total population, Doma monastery is not a big one to be named as the principal monastery of that clan. Generally speaking, the monastery is flourishing. The upper and the lower Likoma clan have over 1,000 households who are all very united. Well, this part of the chat has been recorded. At the the very beginning of it, when I was writing it, I wasn't sure if I should write it down because it's related to me. But I thought since it's being recorded and it's part of the history, so it might be better to write it down anyhow. And it's quite rare. Gyatso Rinpoche, on the day I just finished writing this book, on the 13th of April, I heard that Gyatso Rinpoche passed away. He was over 90 years old. When we look at this part of the history, we can see how great these masters are. Phuntsok Rinpoche also said that Tokutishta and Khenpo Deba and all of those great masters are really the leaders of the local people, and the people really listen to whatever they would instruct. And then Phuntsok Rinpoche also continue to ask lots of questions to Gyatso Rinpoche about the overall situation of Buddhism in the U.S. For example, how many centers are there in New York, in Washington, D.C., or in Colorado? And then asked how many are here that's eligible to receive empowerments, and how many of them are practicing, and is there any restrictions when it comes to practice? Phuntsok Rinpoche really enjoyed asking many questions, especially when it comes to the different situations about religion in China versus in the United States. And we should stop here today.